Welcome, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's speaker series event titled Battleground Banter with Axe Rove. I'm Yasmin Ali, a third-year global studies major with a minor in Arabic, and currently the Fellows Program Ambassador, team leader for two of the IOP's Pritzker Fellows, David Axelrod and Congressman Ken Buck. Today's speakers have shaped two of the most formative presidencies in my life, teaching me the concepts of both yes we can and compassionate conservatism from an early age. As David's team lead, I found it both excellent and exciting to learn from his stories and expertise. Our recent discussions have revealed just how similar our family backgrounds are, and I'm looking forward to building a lasting connection with him. David Axelrod is a renowned American political strategist and former senior advisor to President Barack Obama. He's also the founding director of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, a senior political commentator for CNN, host of the Axe Files podcast, and author of the best-selling memoir, Believer, My 40 Years in Politics. Karl Rove served as senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to President George W. Bush, where he coordinated policymaking and managed various White House offices. He previously led a public affairs firm in Austin. Rove is currently a Fox News contributor and author of the bestseller Courage and Consequence, My Life as a Conservative in the Fight. Our moderator today is Ali Vitali, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent, who has also covered the White House and Trump's 2016 campaign. Before we begin, a few reminders. Please silence all your phones, and during the Q&A portion of today's event, microphones will be set up in the aisles with priority given to student questions. Be sure to also check the newsletter for two upcoming speaker series events, including Haiti, a deep look at a nation in ceaseless turmoil, on Monday, October 21st, 5:30 p.m. at International House, featuring former Haitian Prime Minister Michel Pierre-Louis in conversation with Patrick Gaspard, president of the Center for American Progress. Also, the IOP is pleased to host a student debate titled Which Presidential Candidate is Best for Gen Z on Tuesday, October 29th at 5:30 p.m. on the third floor here at Ida Noyes Hall, featuring Kate Davis, co-president of the University of Chicago Democrats, and Christopher Phillips, president of College Republicans, moderated by the one and only Chuck Todd. If you are a student interested in public service, we encourage you to apply to our paid academic year internships by this coming Monday, October 21st. And finally, the IOP Student Advisory Board will be hosting a spin room based on today's conversation. So if you are a student, we invite you to stay in this very room following the event for dinner and discussion with your peers. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming David Axelrod, Karl Rove, and Ali Vitali.
An entrance.
No, they left the room and didn't tell me. They left me all alone. I was so...
Because I wanted the walk-on music for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Very selfish energy up here today. Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending part of your, I think, Thursday night with us.
Yes.
I'm very excited to be invited here, and I'm very excited to be sitting next to David and Karl, who, of course, already got their introduction but need no introduction. And I wonder what we're going to talk about.
Nothing going on.
Nothing going on. There is a lot going on, and I think we can start with, and as we're talking, so you guys know, I'm sure you will have questions. If you do, we will leave time at the end for that. There will be microphone stations somewhere, though the lights are sort of blinding my retinas. So think about them, hold on to them, and ask them at the end. For me, I'll just start with the thing that I think is consuming my conversations, which is everyone is riding the polar coaster right now. Polls are dominating. But because you two have both been in the rooms, war rooms where strategies are happening at this point in a campaign, how useless or useful is a public poll right now? And David, since we're on your home turf, you can start.
Thank you. First of all, it's good to be home. So great to be here. And I'm really appreciative that my friend Karl Rove is here.
Don't mention the friend thing. Don't damage your reputation.
Career ending.
Career ending.
But we're all on and Ali as well, because we're all on kind of a not a roller coaster, but a hamster wheel right now. So everybody's time is valuable. Honestly, one of my recollections of the 2012 campaign was one day when one poll had us up like 6 and another poll had us down like 8. And people came and asked me, sort of they treated one or the other seriously. I think public polls are sort of a menace in some ways and we never paid attention. I mean, the fact is we had our own polling. We had faith in our own polling. We trusted our own polling. It was rigorous, and it was, polling today is harder than ever because it's hard to reach people. There's an element of trust that has gone out of all of this, but it's also just the way people communicate and so on. So it's expensive. It's expensive to do it off of lists, which is the best way to do it, voter lists that are refreshed on a daily basis. All of that costs money. Campaigns make that investment. So, and you have a long, track that you can follow. So I think the problem with public polls, and I'll turn it over to Karl, is that because they bounce around, because some are right and some are wrong, because people assign too much importance to a 2-point difference when these polls all have margins of error, suffice to say, this is a damn close race. It's basically tied. And not only is it tied, but Karl has his famous blue sheet out here that he puts together every morning with his orange juice on the polling averages.
Decaf coffee. Decaf coffee.
What's the point of drinking coffee if it's decaf? Well, anyway, that's a different
agree
issue,
with
but
that.
tell them about your blue sheet.
Yeah. First of all, I want to agree with David. The presidential campaign has to have confidence in its own pollster. But even then, we generally look at movement. And more than the movement in the ballot, we look at what tends to move people on the basis of issues or characteristics than the horse race. There's a great book on the willingness of the media to sub out coverage of what the candidates say on substantive reasons for the horse race. And I think that's one of the worst things about it. But yeah, every morning I sit down with Real Clear Politics, 538, and the Silver Bulletin, and I keep track of the nationwide number and then the numbers in each one of the states. If it's red, that means Trump is leading. If it's blue, it means Harris is leading. And I track not only what that number is, but I track, is that number different than the number the day before? And again, I'm looking for movement more than anything else. But David's right. I mean, think about this. The 7 states times 3 different aggregates, so you have 21 data points. There's not a single one that is 2 points or better. In fact, today, 16 of the 21 data points are 1% or less. So, and this isn't just, the margin of error. Remember, these numbers are aggregating maybe 6,000 or 7,000 interviews that make up the polls that are portrayed there. I've never seen a race this close, and we're pretty damn close to the election, nor have I seen this small a number of battleground states. The next smallest I can find is 1980, when there were 10 battleground states, interestingly enough, one of which was Texas. In fact, somebody the other day...
Democrats dare to dream that that's still the case.
Yeah, well, keep dreaming. Somebody the other day asked me, they said, well, how does this compare to the battleground states in 2000? The battleground states in 2000, remember there's 7 today, the battleground states in 2000 were Maine, New Hampshire, Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Iowa, Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon.
Don't kid yourself, he's got them all written down on the back.
Yeah, I did that from memory. Yeah, but can you imagine, I mean, 10 states is not a lot. 7 states is even less. And, by the time they're finished, one of the 2 candidates is probably going to be, selling donuts at the local, Dunkin' Donuts to draw, to have contact with voters. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, literally, Trump is going or went to a McDonald's, right? We're there.
I think there's another reason he's doing that.
I think so too. But when you talk about the number of battleground states, there is so much attention being paid right now specifically to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
Do you think it's overblown?
No, I think, first of all, I think both campaigns do analytics, and they make estimates about what the state is that will put them over the top based on the probability of winning the states. And they both believe that Pennsylvania is the tipping state. But there's another reason. Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes. It's the biggest prize among those battleground states. And you know, we did the Institute of Politics, along with Cook Political Report, did an event at the convention in Milwaukee, the Republican convention. I don't know if you were there, but Tony Fabrizio, the pollster for Trump, was asked. That was at a time when Biden was running, and they were feeling pretty good about things. And you know, he was asked, "How many paths do you have?" And he said, "Oh, I can count to 25, but the one that I think is the most expeditious for us is winning Georgia and winning Pennsylvania." And I think we close off his path at that time, Biden's path. That was probably true. It's still vitally important. She could win without winning Pennsylvania, but it would be very, very difficult to do.
I wonder, we just had a conversation about how the blue paper shows tinier margins every day.
Not every day. In fact,
take us back to yesterday.
Yeah, well, look, yesterday Trump was up of the 21 data points, Trump is up in 8, it's unchanged in 7, and she's up in 6. So what has happened here is this is remarkably stable, but don't think that this went, you know, for her, and it's going like this.
Right.
It is going like this, trading within a very narrow range, and what is more happening is that she has, you know, he's bumping up against his ceiling, but she's dropped a little bit from some heights that she was in some of these states.
But given that, so much has happened over the course of the last few months. You had an assassination attempt of a former president.
Twice.
Twice. You had a change to the top of the Democratic ticket. You've had all of these major moments, and it seems to have not changed anything. What does that tell you, Karl, about this electorate? Are they just tuned out?
Well, it
or
did
are they
change.
so settled?
It did change something, because it was clear before June 27th that Biden was going to lose. It may have been only 4 or 5, but it was a persistent 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. And what happened is that once he departed, she gained the support among black, brown, and young voters, and enthusiasm levels among all Democrats moved, and she moved into the lead. And even today, you know, 1.7 in Real Clear Politics, 2.6 in 538, 2.8 in Silver Bulletin. Oops, sorry. So, you know, it's...
This blue sheet is exciting.
Yeah.
You know what? We're ignoring polls anyway. Just, you know.
Yeah. So, where was I? But so
nothing has moved.
Yeah, well, but
Yeah,
the thing is that we are a deeply divided country. Okay, we've had a series of very close races. The aberration was where the race was when Biden left the race, and that was a function largely of people's lack of confidence in him, not as, you know, primarily attached to age, and that the debate kind of calcified those feelings, and he dropped, and she got a lot of that territory back. And now the race is sort of stabilized, and it's very close. In the private polling that you see that the campaigns do on both sides, I think there is an acknowledgement that it's more stable than unstable, and it's stable and close. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we were at an event yesterday, and they asked us to put on a whiteboard our prediction for November and reveal it at the end of the thing. And we both turned our whiteboards over, and they both had question marks on them. And I think
it's a very good politician's answer, too.
Yes.
Well,
we didn't just
give you an answer.
Fall off a turnip truck.
You know, if we had an answer, we'd give you an answer.
Or out of the coconut tree, as it would be.
Tell me about a state that is 0.6% and we have 19 days to go, or a state that's 0.3% and we have 19 days to go. Imagine the little whiff that could move it one way or the other. And then the intangible is, what is the net effective improvement for one candidate over another because of the quality of their ground game, which is not measurable. Ground game cannot buy you 5 points or 10 points, but it can buy you 2 or 3.
Yeah, and if that's the only thing you're trying to move at this point.
It's the field goal team of campaigns, and if you get close enough, that can be important. But all these polls also have margins of error. We don't really know who's ahead and who's behind it in any of those states. And every day you hear different. I mean, polls that are quality polls, that are private polls for Senate candidates, so on. I heard about one in 2 polls in Pennsylvania the same day by 2 pollsters, very highly reputable Democratic pollsters polling for different clients, and one had the race up 2 for Harris and one had the race up 2 for Trump.
At that point, you just sort of sit there and you're like, at least I am. I'm like, I'm good on the polls.
But you know what? I will say this about one of the problems with this plethora of public polling is there is an inclination on the part of the media to cover polls and not people, and it's a big waste of time. And it's like, you know, it's sort of crack for political junkies. But it's about as healthy as that, too.
I'm okay with cutting off the supply. I mean, as someone who loves going out and talking to voters, and I think that is truly the best way to do my job and our job as people who are trying to inform the public about what it's like on the ground. You know, David mentioned something, Karl, about Biden and being tagged, of course, with the question of age. Is that now the thing that is on Trump?
Yeah, before Biden withdrew on the 21st of July, if you looked at it, Trump was leading on the characteristics of cares about people like me, stands for change, honest and trustworthy, strong leader, and has the mental acuity and physical stamina to be effective as president. Biden out, the only one of those that he still leads on is strong leader. Every one of them is gone. So it's interesting. We have a number of different contests going on here, but the 2 biggest are over issues, where if you look at the 3 biggest issues, economy, inflation, and the border, which are up here, the next 3 are healthcare, abortion, and democracy. They're down here. He leads on all 3 of those issues. Now, granted, his lead is slipping on those. In the Fox poll, for example, a month ago, he had a lead of 20 on the border. Today it's 15. On the economy, 15. Today it's 8. But now we also then have the battle over who has the character to be president. And on those, she has erased his advantage that he had vis-a-vis Biden and is now ahead really on only one significant one.
But on the age question, is it fair to tag him for that? He is a different candidate than I even covered in 2015 and 2016. I mean, what do you see when you see this version of the Trump campaign in 2024?
Well, it's bifurcated. There is a far more disciplined, quote, campaign than he has run before, and yet the candidate, for whatever reason, is far more unconstrained, says whatever he wants to say, and hosts dance parties.
I forgot we brought impressions here as well.
Yes, don't get him going.
You were going to say.
A couple of things. This is the best, strategically sound and disciplined campaign that Trump has ever had. Unfortunately, he's the most unhinged that as he's ever been. So you've got a rational campaign and an irrational candidate, and that has issues, a lot of issues. But one of them is the campaign has a strategy, and that strategy has been to tie. They want to make Kamala Harris the incumbent, and their ads are in the main about that, tying her to Biden's economic policies, which are unpopular, tie her to the border, and usually using her own word defending the administration, or words defending the administration's policies. And then there's another line that ties her to left sort of cultural issues to sort of paint her out of the mainstream. And it's very disciplined. Trump goes out there and you never know what the hell's going to happen. So they'll put it on his prompter and he'll read a few words about the economy, about immigration in the way they want him to frame it, about some of the, but then he'll go off on, he is basically, he's a performer, and He riffs up there for 2 hours at these events, and when he says something crazy, that becomes the story. And so you have a campaign that I'm sure cringes when they see what he does, but it undermines the efficacy of the media to some degree, because presidential races are covered more intensively than any race, and you're judged in a more 360 kind of way. I used to call them MRIs for the soul, because of how closely you're covered. So if the candidate is on another program, his own program, I should say, than the campaign media, it makes the media less effective. People default to what they see.
So then did she do enough in her interview with Brett Baer yesterday to distance herself from Biden?
Well, I mean, she declared her independence from Biden.
But is that enough?
Well, I'll tell you, she did a lot better than she did on The View last week. That was a mistake. I mean, their argument is she is a continuation of Biden's policies, and if you're asked and you say, I can't think of anything I would differ with him on, that lends credence, and it's now in one of their ads. I said earlier that when I was with Karl, that if you were the Trump campaign and you could have created a quote with AI of her saying something, that would have been it. So she was much better on Brett Baer on that yesterday. I thought actually she was quite good on that. I thought that show did her a service, because she was very, very, it was a combative moment, and she didn't give any quarter. And we're at a time in the campaign where that, I think, is called for. My thing about I think the Harris campaign navigated the first 2 months of this campaign pretty brilliantly through the second debate, and then they needed a second act, and now they're scrambling for that. And part of it is, I think, an edgier approach to the final 3 weeks of this campaign.
Would you then, on the flip side of this, knowing Republican campaigns so well, would you say that Trump should get on, MSNBC for an interview? I mean,
No.
does that
Why do you
help him?
ask that?
Yeah, no. I think David's right.
Personally, I think he should be doing more outside the realm of Fox, but
Well,
Maybe
there are
not.
two ways.
You're asking him from their standpoint whether
Yeah.
they think that's a good idea.
Yes, I don't think he should go on Fox more. Yes, Rupert. Yes, I'm sorry, I said that. No, look, she needed to do that, and frankly, it was good for Brett as well. He got to ask tough questions, but they were, I think most people look at them and say both sides took away something from that, and she needed to do it to wash away the issue of what she said on The View. Remember, I'm sort of a nut about presidential campaigns. 1976, Gerald Ford is in San Francisco and says, the Soviet Union doesn't dominate Eastern Europe, and is in Williamsburg, Virginia for the next debate, and still is trying to defend it. And therefore the issue hung out there, and people said, well, Jerry's wrong on that. She sort of began to wash that away. What I would do if I were him is I would do two things. One is obviously, and this is difficult, be more disciplined, because David's absolutely right. If he has a message of the day and then says something crazy, guess what? The media is going to cover the crazy thing. The second thing he ought to do is he ought to let some other people do the talking for him. At the Republican convention, some of the most powerful speeches were not, the first 18 minutes and the last 8 minutes of his was great, 62 minutes of crazy in between. But
I said earlier it was a MAGA sandwich in a unity bun.
that sounds right. That's listed on the menu there, you think?
Yeah, you can get it at the local deli. So, but the point is that he needs to have other people say some of this. At the Republican convention, I thought one of the powerful moments was the guy who lost a sister who was raped and killed by an illegal. And it was powerful because you could not listen to him without hearing the pain and the grief. And then at the end, he said, I hope that the man who killed his sister can find Jesus. And you knew that he meant, I hope he can find Christ in his heart. And it was powerful. One of his best news conferences this far, and you could tell that Trump was uncomfortable with it because he was not the star of it, was on the Arizona border where he had 3 people, one who'd been a victim of crime, I believe, another was a rancher who worried about the threat to his farming his ranching operation because he was right on the border. People who were adversely affected by the problem on the border. It helped humanize it. And Trump ought to do both of those things. Be aware that he's got 19 days to deliver a message on the 3 big issues, and that he's oftentimes better served by having other people help describe what that problem is. And instead, David's right. He feels like he's a performer who has to be the performance artist.
But what does it tell you? I mean, J.D. Vance can't even really speak on Trump's behalf. I mean, Trump has undercut him at various points. He can't even say in recent interviews that Trump lost the election.
Well, this is a problem. I mean, because the people who are up for, first of all, Vice President, let's be honest, they do no harm, because if they are heard and listened to, it's because they can see Russia from their porch. You know? So be careful. I mean, they're not going to, we do not elect presidents because of the vice presidents. We elect them in spite of them. They're a nice filler, and they can draw the rallies and, draw the truly, the base to their rallies and occupy time in the news cycle. But we elect them because of the person at the top of the ticket. And, J.D. Vance has his own problems. He's the least popular of all 4 candidates. And he sort of has, created that image. But the main thing is the presidential candidate sets the tone. She sets the tone. He sets the tone for the respective tickets. She was doing, I think David is right, through the debate and for about another 10 days. But then The View was representative of other things. I'm only going to go on programs where it's softball questions that don't create real news. And you need to create news, and the news needs to be, occasionally needs to be, remember she had a really good day when she took the protester in the audience on.
Yep.
So you need some contrast and conflict.
Yeah. The worst thing is when you go on softball programs and make news that you don't mean to make.
Which in that case she did.
She did, right. Absolutely.
Right.
When you talk about the person at the top of the ticket setting the tone, I do think that both of them are trying to make this argument for, in Kamala Harris's case, forward. In Trump's case, it's turning the page from the Biden administration. Who is winning on the question of change right now? The former president or the current vice president?
Can I just break in here? I'd like to comment on that. I think one of the things that's going to define this race is what change are they trying to make? Every race is defined by the incumbent generally. I mean, whether they're running or they're not running, people generally want to find the remedy to what they have, not the replica. And in a normal situation, Biden would define the race, and people would be looking for a replica to the thing that they most that they find most concerning. It could be the policy. It could be that they didn't think he was strong enough. All that would favor Trump. But we have Trump is also in some ways an incumbent, and people are very, very well aware of him. And the fact is, when you have a wrong track number that is as low as it is now, I mean, we still have somewhere over 25 to 30% of people saying the country is on the right track, and 2/3 saying it's not. That is historically low for an incumbent party to win, whether the candidate is the president or someone representing the party. And yet, we are in a tied race. And we're in a tied race because people have these apprehensions about Trump's character. And so the question is, what is the change that people are looking for? Is it change? Is it linear change from a policy, or is it stability after several years of chaos? If that's the thing they're looking for, is Trump the answer to that, or is that, and this is the battle they're having, because she's saying, I'm talking about change, turning a change on this whole decade of division and anger, and he's saying we're going to turn the page on the economic policies.
Yeah. I want to follow up on something you said. Second act. You're absolutely right. He's an incumbent in a way. Each one of these people is running for a second term. He's running for his second term. She's running for a second term of the Biden-Harris administration. And you got to show that you got a second act. And so he can't simply say, trust me, I've made America great before, I'll make America great again. He's got to be able to demonstrate to the American people that he's got something substantive to do. There's a piece today in the Wall Street Journal. I thought it was really terrific, well done, well researched, thoughtful. I think I did a hell of a job on it myself. But one of my points was neither one of these people is talking about something that's deeply important. When did tipped income become the central driver of economic growth in our country?
When Nevada became a swing state.
Yeah, exactly. So why is tipped income better than an hourly wage or a salary? And does anybody think our problems are going to be solved by saying we're going to give $25,000 to new first-time home buyers? I mean, first of all, try piecing that out. And both of these people this is a consequential election, and both of these people have laid out, to the degree that they've laid things out, superficial. Now, she's done more substantive things in that they are, $25,000 for first-time home buyers. I'm going to give $50,000 to small business startups rather than $25,000 through the SBA. I'm going to have a home health care benefit through Medicare, but I'm not going to tell you how many hundreds of billions of dollars it's going to cost, and magically the drug companies are going to pay for it. But at least she's got something out there. If he wants to sort of break this his way, had better be out there saying, here's what I'm going to do besides tipped income and the SALT deduction and things that you have no comprehension or belief. 100% tariffs, we're going to do them everywhere.
The SALT deduction, as a New Yorker, I will say, makes me laugh.
Yeah,
because the reason it doesn't exist now is because he got rid of it as a punishment to New York.
Before the Pennsylvania was in the mix, and some of these other states, Michigan. But he's actually now on a kind of tax Santa Claus tour, like every audience that he sees, but it's all sort of done on the spot and so there's no...
And it's not repeated, she's at least repeating these things so they start to make their way into consciousness.
There's also, Karl, there is a message behind the aggregation of things that she's doing, which is that we've got that the middle class is scuffling and working class folks are scuffling. They've dealt with this high inflation. There's been anxiety among working class people in this country for a very long time because we've gone through decades of change. And she's saying, this is going to be my focus. And so there's more coherency to what she's saying.
There may be, but he also has a theory of the case, which is you're the people who are forgotten. You're the people who've been overlooked by the elites. You're the people who are the snobs in academia and the
Not any of you.
Well, maybe. We'll have a test afterwards.
His theory of the case has been the same since 2015.
Exactly.
I've been to over 150 of Trump's rallies in this time.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
We'll be the judge of that.
It's very similar.
After the campaign, you're going to be checked in for a couple of days at a facility and checked out.
Hopefully on a beach somewhere with my Marriott points. But the thing that I think outside of tipped income, outside of a focus on the middle class, the consistent thread over the course of the last 3 years has been reproductive freedom. I hear about it consistently from voters. It is doing, I think, some interesting things in trends among women voters, specifically older women who say, this is not something I've thought about, but now my grandkids and my kids have to think about it, and they don't love that. What role do you think, both of you, that abortion will play in this upcoming election? It is the first test of Dobbs and Roe in a presidential.
Yeah, listen, I think one of the things that the polling is clear on is that there are huge gender gaps on both sides. And the question, one simple way to look at who's going to win this election is are they proportionally the same? Does someone have more of a gender gap than the other? And he's running up big numbers among men. She's running up equal or better numbers among women. And if women vote in equal or larger proportions, the margin for Harris, percentage-wise, she's going to win this election. And abortion rights is a huge driver. And there's one ancillary benefit of it from the Harris campaign standpoint. This is an issue that she deeply feels.
Yes.
And you can see it when she speaks on it. On the debate stage, you saw it. On the trail, you can see it. So that is really important because authenticity is very, very important. And sometimes on some of these, on the arcana of some of this economic policy, she's saying the right words. I know she gets the policy, but she's saying the right words, and it feels sometimes like she learned them at Berlitz. Whereas on this, there's deep, deep passion. So, but I think it's going to be a big driver of vote for her.
On the other side,
yeah.
Republicans that I've spoken to on the Hill, even when I was covering Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, others during the primary, they sometimes feel like the dog that caught the car on this issue.
Yeah.
Do you hear that?
Yeah, sure I do. But I'm not going to dispute the gender gap. This is one of the big stories of this election, is a huge advantage for the Democrats among women. It's a significant, though not as big, gap among men that benefits Trump. And we've never been in a modern election in which there aren't more women voting than men.
Right.
Having said that, I think it is simplistic to suggest that this is being driven exclusively or even principally by abortion. Because if it were, this wouldn't be, you know, if you got 4 issues and abortion's among them, it's number 4. If you've got health care in there, it's number 5. If you add in democracy, it's number 5 or number 6. So I think those to whom the issue is critical are almost entirely in her camp, but I think there are other things that are giving her the advantage among women that drive that number up besides
Sure.
Because there are some people who are saying it's primarily the character issues. You know, he's not honest and trustworthy. You take a look at the division among men and women on that, big for women who say he's not honest and trustworthy. She represents change. That's big among women. Not, you know, it's not as big among men. You take a look at the issue of cares about people like me. Big for her. And to some degree, that's one of the few things where she begins to close the advantage on among men. It's just that they don't move if they think she's slightly more. But it's not simply abortion. It's character and other things that have to do with how he handles himself that cause the women vote to get
Well,
that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't want to suggest that that's the only issue. But I did see a poll in the last week where people were asked if there's a single issue.
I'll tout it was an NBC poll. I said, I'll tout it. It was an NBC poll.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, it may not be exactly right, but it was indicative of something. And abortion actually, more voters percentage-wise,
If
chose
there's
that
one
issue.
issue,
If
yeah.
there
The
was
way they
one
asked
issue.
it, they said if
It's
it
sort
was
of like
one
the-
issue that you would vote on.
Abortion is now the gun rights issue of the left and of women.
I will say,
At one point, you could just simply say that among one of the things that was driving men in the Clinton era, for example, was concern about their Second Amendment rights. And it wasn't the broad one, but boy, if you gave men a chance to opine on it, it was a driver.
yeah, and certainly this is, I think, one of the things that I hear about the most just when I'm traveling, and it's anecdotal. Voter interviews are not science, but then again, neither are polls these days. The thing that I think you're picking up on when you talk about the character issue and the other things that might be pushing people into the Harris camp, they are making a huge push for disillusioned Republicans right now. I wonder what you make of it, and then David, what you make of it, this idea of putting someone like Liz Cheney front and center, of bringing out former people who worked in the Trump administration, Sarah Matthews and others. What do you make of that?
I'm not certain that you know, with the exception perhaps of Liz and her father, that people sort of say, you know, geez, that's somebody I relate to. But the general undertone of I'm appealing to Republicans. More important than that is talking about the things that appeal to them. And so being more centrist, you know, is helpful to her. And to the degree that she talks about those things, my personal view is that it's more powerful to be focused on a specific thing. And to me, the greatest vulnerability he has among Republicans that is a specific thing is this promise to pardon the January 6th protesters, particularly those who were found guilty of attacking police officers. If I talk to Republicans who are still concerned about, you know, who they're going to vote for, that's one of the touch points for them is that's, you know, I'm a law and order Republican. But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, he also, there is the issue of Ukraine and what that means. I mean, the Republican Party is a divided party on the issue of what the role of the country should be, and there are traditional Republicans who are strongly supportive of supporting Ukraine. Trump is not in that camp and said today, in fact, that he thought that Zelensky was responsible for provoking the war. So, I think that's an opportunity.
By failing to surrender?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
I mean, you even heard it when they met.
Look, it's broader than that, and this whole issue of the economics. Today we had Phil Gramm write a piece in the Wall Street Journal about tariffs. So Trump had a chance to ameliorate a lot of that in his choice of a vice presidential running mate. It would not have settled the election, but if he had picked a Youngkin or a Tim Scott or a Doug Burgum, it would be better for him, because it would have the sort of the Reaganite wing of the party say, well, we've got somebody on the ticket.
Yeah.
But
what happened there was, I was going to touch on this earlier. There was this. Did I say this earlier? I can't remember because we've been together so much. But the mood of that convention was such that they felt that that he had a free pass to pick anybody he wanted because he was going to win, and his kids were, pushing him to pick Vance, and he thought Vance. Trump views the world as a casting director, a TV casting director. He thought Vance did well on TV and on the Sunday shows and stuff, and he chose him. I'm not sure he would have made the same pick if we were in the situation we are today. He might have been more apt to hear arguments about how it affected his election.
Do you think there's a downside for Democrats focusing so heavily on Republicans? I hear this from some Democratic sources who wish the tent wasn't looking so much to the center.
Yeah, well, they're wrong, I think. I don't. No, listen, election is about addition. Winning elections are about additions. And there are these voters who are disaffected with their own candidate and their own party. And there are many things, including in some cases, when you think about suburban Republicans and independent leaning Republicans, abortion rights may be one of them. National security may be one of them. But I also think, I listened to her speech in Philadelphia yesterday, or around Philadelphia yesterday on this subject. And I do think there is a hunger. One of the things that interested me was how people reacted to the vice presidential debate. There were dial groups, some of which I was privy to. And after the debate, people had a surprising reaction, which was, man, I thought it was a pretty unremarkable debate. And they said, that was a great debate. And these were swing voters. Like, why was that a great debate? Because they listened, they were respectful to each other, and they were, no matter whether you think it was...
Very Midwest nice.
Yes, exactly, yeah. One guy probably more authentically than the other, but nonetheless, they and it said to me that there is an element of people just being sick of this constant 24/7 scorched earth politics where we're at each other's throats, and it's considered betrayal to try and work with people across party lines, and every issue is weaponized, and in Trump's case, anyone who disagrees with him becomes the subject of not just scorn but worse. And I think there is an opportunity for her in that. I don't think that's part of what she wants to turn the page on, and I think there is an audience out there of Americans who do that. And I would say to my friends on the left that we ought not let Trump dictate how we approach politics. We ought not accept his terms of how politics should be, that somehow we are in, we need to be in sort of, not armed, I don't want to use that word, but in camps across a jagged edge shaking our fists at each other and disqualifying each other as Americans or as patriots. You know, I mean, I think Karl has a lot of crazy ideas. But
For one, I like you.
yes. Well, that's what you hear when you go home, I'm sure. But
yeah. The one thing about David is my wife has a crush on. Tell David hello.
but
Am I missing?
But I'll tell you something. Let me just make this point. Karl and I have obviously known of each other for a very long time. I really never talked to him until 2010 or so. He published an autobiography. I read it. It's a great autobiography.
It's a memoir. It's not an autobiography.
Whatever. But in it, he talked about something that an experience I share. We both lost parents to suicide. I didn't know that about Karl. He probably didn't know that about me. And I wrote him and I said, you know, I didn't know this and I'd love to talk to you about it. And it'd be great if we could go out and talk about suicide prevention together and share our story, because I think it would get a lot of attention if the two of us, you know, now we're together a lot. I always joke that people, given the political environment, they're so fascinated by a Republican and Democrat who can actually sit together. We're like the pandas, you know. People say, "Isn't that cute? They play together," you know. So, but the point is, we share a common humanity, and we should work hard to try and find that. And we should not buy into this scorched earth policy that people who disagree with you are not just people with different points of view, political opponents, and so on, but enemies and alien and threatening. And you know, one thing Trump forces people into those corners, but it's unhealthy.
Well, he's been talking, right, about the enemy.
Yes, the enemy within. Yes.
Enemy within.
Listen, it's terribly disturbing talk, but it doesn't define all of every Republican in America or even every Trump supporter.
Yeah. Can I build on something you said about centrists, the left of the Democratic Party? Mm-hmm. People need to awaken to the fact, why are there now 1 million more registered Republicans in Florida than Democrats? Why is the registration margin, which has historically in Nevada been 130 to 150,000 more Democrat registrations than Republican, now down to 30,000? Why is it that Pennsylvania has gone from like an 800,000 Democratic registration advantage to a 300 and some odd thousand person advantage, and it's declining almost every week? Why? Because the Democratic Party, to a lot of America, appeared to go too far to the left over the last couple of years. And so, you know, it's not driven just by, oh, geez, we love Donald Trump. It is by a view that you know, the woke agenda and DEI and sort of how the, you know, anti-energy, you know, I see it in Texas. We have counties in South Texas, largely Hispanic, that, I mean, one of them, Zavala County, last voted for a Republican president in 1920. Voted for Hillary Clinton by better than 2-1, gave Donald Trump a 20% margin in 2020. Why? Because you got a high school education, you got a CDL license, and you're driving in the oil patch and making $110,000 a year, and your wife's working at the diner in Kennedy and making pretty good tips from the oil crowd coming in for lunch, and you figured out one party's coming for your job and the other one wants to protect it. So there's this governing from the center. Tell me an election that was won on the extremes. We didn't vote for Joe Biden to be transformational. We voted for him because he promised normality. He's going to return things to a way and then pass it on.
But let me just say something, because it's interesting. You listen. I've been one who said all along that I think we have to do something about climate, and I would think the people in Florida right around now might think that too. But and so I don't think this is an option unless we are insane, because this thing is just going to get worse and worse and worse. But I also think that we need to have a conversation as a country about this and be sensitive to the fact that if you're that person who Karl's talking about, that job is an existential issue for them. Yeah. Just as I believe climate is an existential issue for the country and the world. So that discussion has to include, well, what happens to this person in this transition, in this discussion? And sometimes we become so morally invested in doing what we believe is the right thing for the future and for humanity and the survival of the planet, that we're not really sensitive to the economic implications for people. I'm not saying we shouldn't move forward on climate action, but we should do it together, and we should have that discussion. There should be some sensitivity to it. And that, honestly, I think, is where we ought to go. That's where we ought to lead as political leaders. You know, Barack Obama was not particularly an ideologue. I mean, he certainly had progressive positions, but he wasn't the most progressive candidate in that campaign for president. And he was very pragmatic about solving problems. But what he did believe is that we ought to try and solve problems and not just weaponize them. And I think that's where a lot of the country is.
Yeah.
You know,
can I add to that? I agree with you.
one quick thought, because then they're going to start asking questions.
I agree with you on what you said. We also need to celebrate our success. We're the only major industrialized economy in the world which has reduced greenhouse gas emissions for the last several decades without beggaring our economy. And it's because we're an innovative society that is finding ways to produce and use energy in a more carbon-sensitive way. And so if we took our innovation and got the rest of the world involved in these same kind of things, producing and using energy less, imagine what would happen if the world was starting to reduce carbon emissions the same degree that the U.S. is. And you know, instead we look at it. You know, I come from an energy-producing state, but about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was down in Houston with a bunch of natural gas producers, and the subject of the day was, what can we do to continue the decline in carbon emissions as we produce and use energy? And the technologies that we have exported to the world could have a real impact on this.
So I have one last question for you guys, and then for anyone else who's in the room, there are mics on the left and right sides that you guys can go to in the aisles.
You don't have to go to them depending on your political orientation. So just choose the nearest one.
But extra fun, I guess, if you want to. My last question for you guys is how you think late deciders will break in the next few weeks. Do you think that they will all break in one direction as it typically happens, or do you think that we might see a splintering? David, then Karl.
Look, I think partly it relies on events in the next few weeks. I mean, I think the prelude to your question is what could change people's views. And, you know, for example, we had a major development in the Middle East today. I'm of the mind that when Israel attacked Hezbollah, that was 10 days after the debate. Now, maybe it was coincidence, but that was when Harris's progress stopped. I think because it insinuated a national security issue into the race, and that worked against her, partly because of how people thought about the effectiveness of the Biden administration on this issue, partly because I think it triggered some gender bias. So now we don't know what's going to happen in the next 19 days relative to Hamas, relative to Iran. Yeah. That's just one thing. There are so many things we don't know and how it will push people one way or another. If we have a terrorist attack, if we have an act of domestic violence, political violence, I should say, domestic political violence, you know, there are so many things that might happen that could tip a very close race. Generally, you're right. When it breaks one way or the other, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to break that big. And I think we have a close race now. It may be that it'll break enough that most of the battleground states will end up tipping over one way or the other, but I don't think it's going to be by a lot.
First of all, a confession. I had heard David the other day make this observation about the impact of the Mideast conflict on Kamala Harris's positioning, and I thought it was so wise I worked it into my column today without attribution, of course. But
I've got witnesses.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'll send you your $20 royalty. But I don't know. this is, we've seen elections like this where it has moved, but like 1980. I mean, we have one debate featuring Carter and Reagan.
A week before the
A
election.
week before the election, and Reagan says, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And says, I'm the governor of the most populous state in the union back when California had a better reputation. And we see late movement. But I'm with David. I think that, first of all, there's not a lot of movement. Both of these people have strong adherents, motivated by strong feelings for their candidate or against the opposition. And there's a very small group that is up for grabs and a very small group which are weakly linked to their choices. But I'm with David. A puff of air could move people this way or that way. I think you and I may be in the minority. I was with James Carville recently, and James said,
My old professor.
Yeah, James, God, they all got to move one way or that. Well, I said, James, what way are they going to go? Damn if I know. But they're all going to move one way or the other. And
That's what class sounded like, too.
yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's the weirdest human being I know, but I love the guy. But this is why this election is so interesting, is because so much depends on small movement. One thing we haven't talked about tonight is what is the practical effect of, does one side have a bigger get out the vote operation motivated by, driven by well-motivated, enthusiastic people? Both of them have their enthusiastic adherents. My gut tells me the Democrats have they've been at this for a year and a half, starting with Biden, using headquarters and organizers and at it for a long while. And the Trump campaign basically began in August. Now, they may have more enthusiastic people, but volume matters in something like this.
You say this is an interesting election. And I agree with you. As practitioners, we look at it and say, wow, this is, I am reminded of what President Obama told me once early in the administration on a very complicated day. And he turned to me and he said, this stuff would really be interesting if we weren't right in the middle of it. I think most people feel that way about this election, too.
Exactly.
So to the people who are also just as
He
in
didn't
the
say
middle of
stuff,
it as
by the way.
everybody else, we'll go from this side then to this side, and if we can keep questions short, we'll keep answers short. We'll try to hit as many people in these seemingly long lines as we can. Go ahead.
I'll be brief. David, you mentioned that in today's politics, there's sort of this scorched earth dynamic. I feel like there's also a dynamic where, as a politician, you can't say the words, not necessarily I'm sorry, but maybe we got that wrong. And I wonder if you think in, probably not this election, but in future elections, there's room for politicians to say things like, on the border, we overestimated or underestimated sort of things, and maybe...
I think this is so important. 1961, when John F. Kennedy was a new president, we had this disaster in the Bay of Pigs, Cuba, where the U.S. helped instigate a counter-revolution, or tried to, against Fidel Castro, and it was a disaster. And Kennedy held a press conference, and he said, victory has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan. Well, I'm the responsible officer in this government. And, his approval rating went up because people want to see leaders take responsibility and acknowledge mistakes. I think President Biden, when the Afghanistan withdrawal went poorly, would have done better to say, I believe we did the right thing by leaving, but I don't believe we did I don't believe we left in the right way, and I'm very, it's my responsibility, and I intend to find out why. I think he would have done better to do that. And I think on the border, yes, I think conceding some mistakes would have been important. And let me just say on the border, I've always believed Karl's administration, the Bush administration, worked on comprehensive immigration reform, and to their everlasting credit. Our administration worked on it as well, and it included stronger border security along with pathways to citizenship, along with strictures about employers who abuse the system and so on. There is such jaundice about the border now that in order to get to the second to the other elements that we have to do, we have to be serious about that. So, but the short answer to your question is yes. Yeah, I guess I violated already the rule.
Over here on this
Should have
side.
said yes.
I just wanted to thank you guys for coming up tonight, first of all. My name's Anna, I'm a 4th year in the college, and my question is on, there seems to be, this was brought up in the New York Times this morning, general cynicism towards government, and that's been like significantly growing in the past like couple of years. Do you guys see the campaigns as being able to use this in the past 3 weeks to make a change, or to, you know, tilt one way or another, or for the better of the country itself, like take away this cynicism, and after that, you know, whoever does end up becoming president, like what are they to do to sort of also remove this distrust in government as an institution?
Campaign's going to add to the cynicism and distrust. It's going to be upon the next president to try and set a tone that draws us back together and restores confidence. Part of it is social media, part of it is a scorched earth politics. Some is the time that we're in. You know, this was started when the American people said, you know, Wall Street is getting bailed out and we, the ordinary people, are getting screwed. And then giving rise to the Tea Party movement. And then, you know, this has just been going on for a while. And it's not just government, it's trouble. It's more troubling.
Generally.
It's all our institutions. I mean, whether it's the courts, whether it's the media, whether it's the church, all of these things in our modern society are less trusted by the American people. But I do think the president plays an important role in setting a tone. I'm not certain that the next president is going to be able to turn it dramatically around, but the next president, whether it's he or she, could do things that would start putting it in the right direction.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I just want to say two things. One is, we talk about this a lot. The whole project of social media, from a business standpoint, is to keep people online to go to buy things, and the insight of the industry and their algorithms is the way you do that is you pander to people's outrage, alienation, anger, and that keeps people online. And it pushes us into our silos, in which that heightens cynicism and heightens our divisions. And we need to get our arms around that problem. The other thing I just want to say is, obviously we have somewhat different views about what the role of government should be. And I was involved in but not that institutions are important, so let me just say that. But I was deeply involved in the Affordable Care Act fight. And I came to it as someone who has a child with a chronic illness who we almost went bankrupt when I was a young reporter because we couldn't get insurance. She was a baby, and we wanted to get different insurance for her, but she had a pre-existing condition, and it was a nightmare. And I wept the night the Affordable Care Act passed. And I said to President Obama, I want to thank you on behalf of families like mine who won't have to have that nightmare. And he said, that's why we do the work. I think we have to keep that in mind, that government is a tool that we can use to try and solve problems and improve the lives of the country and lives of people in the life of the country. And we should not ever lose that. You know, we should challenge it. We should make it work better. We should be more innovative. We should think about different ways. We can catalyze change. We don't always have to micromanage change from the top. There are all kinds of discussions. But it is really important, if we're going to solve big problems, to not lose that faith. And so I really think it should be the project of all our leaders to say, you know what? We're about trying to solve problems and not try to weaponize them all the time.
Hi, I'm Gina. I'm a third-year poli-sci student in the college. Thank you for this conversation. I have been hearing a lot of just like talk about the reason why Kamala is not gaining male voters, male black voters, male Latina voters, male white voters, is not because of a race issue. It's actually a sexism or misogyny issue. I'm just wondering if you guys agree with this and this feeling, and then Also, if you think this applies to Gen Z male voters as well.
Well, look, I think that I think sexism is a reality. We're trying to do something we've never done before. She has not run as a historic candidate. She has not made this a thrust of her campaign. I think she was wise not to do that because, you know, when Barack Obama ran, he never talked about the fact that he would be the first black president. We kind of assumed people would know that. And if that motivated them, they would vote for him. And if it motivated them against him, they'd probably vote against him. But most people wanted him to speak to their lives and their concerns. And he said, I'm proudly of the black community, but I'm not limited to it. I think she's approaching this the right way, but there's still sexism. That's clearly an element. I think, you know, we do a disservice to, you know, particularly when we're talking about some of these younger black men who are distancing themselves. You would think on the one hand, given Trump's record of sort of blatantly racist acts and language, that would be enough. But I think people look to see, you know, their own lives shape their experience, and there is a sense of, you know, this is a generation that's way detached from the civil rights generation, and they look around, and there hasn't been as much progress as they would like to see. And, you know, in some ways, Trump is a big middle finger for people who are unhappy with the status quo. And so I think there's some of that. What element of that what element does sexism play? I can't answer that question, but we shouldn't use it as a blanket explanation for why some of these younger voters might be disenchanted. You know, some of them may be the war. There may be all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, I agree with David that you got to be careful on that, because I think a lot of them, the shared experiences, the lives that we live govern how we act. And a lot of them are saying, you know what, things were better for me before. Because, you know, if you're starting out, it's harder to get on the treadmill that takes you up. And I also agree with David on the issue of I'm not certain it's misogyny, as there is a tepidness in a moment of grave national concern. Is she up to it? That's why I thought it was smart for her to go out today and to talk about what happened in Israel, because she looked like a commander-in-chief when she did so. And the more that she is seen opining on these things, particularly in a serious venue. This is what, I think it was wrong to go on The View. It was going to be, girls' night out. And instead of hearing a prospective president of the United States, and today she looked like a commander-in-chief, she didn't on The View. And that's why that period of 10 days where it was sort of like, let's go do warm and fuzzy things was a mistake. It just sort of let the air out.
This is one of the challenges, though, of being a 90-day candidate. Being vice president is a inherently demeaning office, okay? Because you're basically standby equipment. You're not making any decisions really, and you're sort of background music. And so people didn't really know her, and she's got 90 days basically to make this sale. If she had the opportunity to do more of that, and people were paying attention to that, that would be to her benefit.
I will say I wrote a book on women in the presidency and why we haven't had one yet. And yes, sexism and misogyny is a key part of this equation. It's an intangible that we'll never know how much it is. But Kamala Harris is solving for an imagination barrier because no one has ever seen someone like her in that position. She is forced to do this in as many different ways as possible. I agree, cutting the profile of standing there as a commander-in-chief, talking about the lethal force of the military, the role on the foreign stage. All of that helps people bridge the imagination barrier. Over here.
Hi, my name is Jacob. I'm a third year in the college. And do you guys mind if I ask a down ballot question?
Congress reporter here. We love it.
So there's a fascinating Senate race that's been developing towards the end of this campaign, kind of challenging all of the assumptions that Republicans were going to clean up the Senate pretty easily. That being the Nebraska Senate race, where an independent candidate that has fairly progressive positions has said that he's not going to caucus with the
Comes out of the labor movement.
Yeah, and he said that his internal polls have shown him up His opponent's internal polls have showed her up. Is that a realistic, is that a realistic target for Democrats to look at? They can't publicly ally with him, probably.
Well, I'll let Karl answer because I think there has been a level of nervousness, at least awareness among Republicans that, wow, Senator Fisher there is not like a leading light, and this guy is a good candidate. It's I think a long shot, but Democrats are in a position because of the seats that they have up this year. Republicans really have very few vulnerabilities. Democrats have lots of vulnerabilities. And right now, as you're sitting here today, it seems likely that Democrats will lose at least 2 Senate races and maybe more depending. There are a lot more that are on the bubble.
Which do you think they are?
Well, I mean, you'd have to say Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan.
You think they're going to lose all of those?
No, I think they're on the bubble. I think they will win them narrowly, but they certainly could lose them. But if it's 51-49, you've got to take some shots. So yes, I would invest in that race because they got to win somewhere. They're trying in Texas. They're trying in Florida. None of these are, you'd necessarily predict that they would win.
I was in Omaha last week, and you understated that he's fairly progressive. The guy is to the left of Bernie Sanders. And in a state that Donald Trump's going to carry by 16 or 18 points, he's going to have a nice show, but it ain't going to get across the finish line.
I don't know if he's to the left.
David's
I don't know if he's to the left of Bernie Sanders, but he certainly will be in the eyes of Nebraskans when you guys get through.
Yeah. And David's right. Look. There's not a single, non-Democrat who's donated to the guy. His money's coming from every rich Democrat around the country because they're desperate for an opportunity. They're spending money in Texas. Good luck. Even Theodore Cruz is going to be able to withstand that.
Last question over here.
I'm sorry to those who didn't get to ask.
Hi,
it's our fault.
my name is Rohil. I'm a 4th year here in the college, and I want to ask another kind of like down ballot question in terms of like split ticket voters. I think in a lot of the swing states, looking at the Senate races, a lot of the Democrats are running at least a couple points ahead of Vice President Harris. So as a campaign, like the Trump campaign, do you bank on those people splitting their ticket and voting for a Democratic Senate candidate, but still for Trump? Or from the Harris campaign perspective, do you kind of assume that they're going to come back home and vote for her in the end?
Number of ticket splitters is going to be smaller than we were in an era where there are very few ticket splitters, which makes them actually more important. That's what Sherrod Brown is attempting to do in Ohio. He's attempting to get nominal Republicans who would otherwise vote for the GOP candidate to vote for him. Similarly, Hovde in Wisconsin, there are 60,000 people in the WOW counties, Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington, the suburban counties around Milwaukee, and in the Fox River Valley, the area leading into Green Bay, who voted for the Republican candidate for State House, State Senate, or Congress, but didn't vote for Donald Trump last time around. So Tammy Baldwin is going to try and get those people, and Hovde is going to try and win them back. So a smart campaign doesn't depend upon the base only, but it also tries to minimize the defections and of ticket splitters who may support one candidate and not another.
We should we should also mention that Democrats have a structural advantage in the House races where 18 of them are running in districts that Trump carried. I'm sorry, where 18 Republicans are running in districts that Biden carried, and only 7, I think, the reverse. So that should favor Democrats. The question is there strategic voting? Do people say, I'm afraid Trump's going to win, and therefore I'm going to or the other way around? And I don't know, these races are so close, I'm not sure people are going to think that way. I've always been a little bit leery about this notion of strategic voting. I just want to say one thing, Ali, before you wrap this up. I'm doing some of you have been there, I'm doing a seminar every Monday. I think this is my last one next Monday before the election, on the election, trying to get under the hood of the election, and we're going to be beaming in people from the people who know what's going on from some of the key battleground states. on Monday, so I urge, this students only. So I'm just looking around and think there may be a few non-students here.
Yeah, so don't try and
Young at heart, but not enrolled.
Also,
this
for
is gonna be
students in
neat.
the room, there is a student spin room dinner after this. Again, just for students. But I do appreciate everyone, student and non, for coming out today, and especially to David and Karl for sharing their expertise and time with us. Give a round of applause.